The
Will
richest
you
man in
marry me?
Boston never forgot
Yes.
the woman who stopped
Yes,
walking.
I will.
Rain hammered the city streets like a curtain of silver as Claire Bennett locked the door of her flower shop and pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. It was nearly 9 o'clock on a cold October evening, and most people had already disappeared indoors. The sidewalks were nearly empty. Storefront lights reflected across wet pavement. Traffic moved slowly beneath the storm clouds hanging over the city. Claire adjusted the canvas bag hanging from her shoulder and began the 15-minute walk to her apartment. It had been a long day. A wedding order had arrived late. A supplier had delivered the wrong roses. One of her delivery vans needed repairs. Yet despite everything, she still found herself smiling. That was simply who Claire was. She believed every day deserved at least one reason to be grateful. As she crossed a quiet side street, a sudden movement near an alley caught her attention. Most people would have kept walking. The weather was miserable. The neighborhood was unfamiliar after dark. Common sense encouraged people to mind their own business. Claire slowed anyway. Something about the figure standing near the brick wall felt wrong. The man appeared soaked from the rain. His expensive-looking jacket was drenched. He looked exhausted. More importantly, he seemed disoriented. Claire hesitated for only a moment before changing direction. "Excuse me," she called gently. The man turned toward her. Even from several feet away, she could see the strain in his expression. He looked like someone carrying far more weight than a rainy evening should create. "Are you all right?" she asked. For a second, the stranger seemed surprised that anyone had stopped. "I am fine," he replied automatically. Claire immediately recognized the answer. It was the response people gave when they were definitely not fine. "You do not look fine." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "That obvious?" "A little." Rain continued falling around them. Claire glanced toward the empty street. "Do you need help?" The stranger looked away briefly. "I just need a place to sit for a few minutes." Claire studied him carefully. He did not appear dangerous. He looked tired, worn down, as though life had demanded too much recently. "There is a coffee shop 2 blocks away," she offered. "You can get out of the rain." "Thank you." He took a step forward before stopping suddenly. Claire noticed him steady himself against the wall. Concern immediately crossed her face. "Maybe you should sit down now." The man laughed softly despite himself. "That might be a good idea." A covered bus stop stood nearby. Claire guided him there without making a fuss about it. Once seated, the stranger exhaled slowly. "Better?" she asked. "Much." For a few moments neither spoke. Cars passed occasionally. Rain tapped against the shelter roof overhead. Claire opened her bag and removed a bottle of water she had planned to drink during the walk home. She handed it to him. "Here." The stranger looked genuinely surprised. "You are carrying emergency supplies?" Only for thirsty strangers. That earned a real smile. The transformation was immediate. Beneath the exhaustion, he was handsome, well-spoken, clearly educated. Yet there was something lonely in his eyes that Claire could not ignore. "I am Claire," she said. "Ethan." The introduction felt simple enough. Neither realized how important it would become. "Nice to meet you, Ethan." "Likewise." Another gust of wind pushed rain beneath the shelter. Claire shivered slightly. Without thinking, she removed the blue knitted scarf wrapped around her neck. "Take this." Ethan blinked. "What?" "You are soaked." "So are you." "I have a coat." She held out the scarf. "Take it." Ethan stared at the bright blue fabric for a moment before accepting it. "Thank you." "You are welcome." He wrapped it around his neck. The simple gesture seemed to affect him more than she expected. Perhaps because nobody had shown him kindness recently. Perhaps because genuine kindness had become rare. Claire did not know. Nearby, something slipped from Ethan's jacket pocket and landed on the bench. Neither noticed immediately. It was a business card, partially soaked by rainwater. The printed name had begun to blur. Before Ethan could retrieve it, Claire picked it up and tucked it safely into her bag. "You almost lost this." "Thanks." He barely glanced at it. The storm continued for another 15 minutes. During that time, they exchanged simple conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. Claire talked about her flower shop. Ethan listened carefully. Ethan mentioned that he traveled frequently for work. Claire never asked what kind of work. There was something refreshing about the conversation. No expectations. No hidden agenda. Just two strangers sharing shelter from a storm. Eventually, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A black SUV turned the corner and stopped nearby. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Relief mixed with responsibility. "That is my ride." Claire stood. "Good." Ethan rose as well. For a moment, neither moved. Rain continued falling around them. The city lights reflected across the wet pavement. Something about the moment felt strangely significant despite its simplicity. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "For stopping." Claire smiled. "Everybody needs help sometimes." The words lingered between them. Then Ethan opened the SUV door and climbed inside. Seconds later, the vehicle disappeared into the rain-soaked streets of Boston. Claire watched it go before beginning her walk home. She never noticed the expensive security team inside the vehicle. She never knew the man she had helped was one of the wealthiest people in the city. She never imagined that the soaked business card resting inside her bag belonged to a millionaire whose life had just changed because one woman chose not to keep walking. Claire slept surprisingly well that night. The storm eventually faded, but the memory of the stranger at the bus stop remained. There had been something unusual about Ethan, not because of the way he looked. Boston was full of successful professionals. It was something else. The way he listened. The way he seemed genuinely surprised that someone had stopped to help him. The next morning, Claire unlocked the front door of Bennett Flowers just after 7 o'clock. The familiar scent of fresh lilies and roses greeted her immediately. Sunlight filtered through the large display windows. For a few hours, she became completely absorbed in work. Deliveries needed preparation. Wedding arrangements required final adjustments. Customers arrived steadily throughout the morning. Around noon, while searching through her canvas bag for a receipt, she discovered the rain-soaked business card she had picked up the night before. "Right," she murmured. The card still looked damaged from the storm. The ink had blurred. Most of the printed information was unreadable. Only part of a name remained visible. "Ethan." Claire smiled faintly. She considered throwing it away but decided against it. Instead, she placed it inside a desk drawer near the register. Meanwhile, several miles away, Ethan Brooks sat inside a private conference room on the 32nd floor of Brooks Capital headquarters. Executives filled the table. Financial reports covered multiple screens. Normally, Ethan dominated meetings like this. Today, his attention drifted repeatedly. "Are you all right?" asked Daniel Mercer, his longtime chief operating officer. Ethan looked up. "Why? You have been staring out the window for 10 minutes. A few executives exchanged amused looks. Ethan rarely appeared distracted. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Have you ever met someone completely unexpected?" The room fell silent. Daniel blinked. "That is not the question I expected today." Ethan smiled slightly. Neither was the answer. The meeting continued, but his thoughts kept returning to the previous evening. The blue scarf still rested around his neck. He had not removed it since arriving home. That alone felt ridiculous. He owned watches worth more than most cars. Yet somehow a simple knitted scarf meant more than anything in his apartment. 2 days later, Claire was arranging flowers near the storefront window when the bell above the entrance chimed. She glanced up automatically. For a brief second, her heart skipped. Ethan stood in the doorway. Dry this time. Clean-shaven. Better rested. The exhaustion she had noticed during the storm seemed largely gone. "Hi," he said. Claire smiled immediately. "Hi yourself." Ethan stepped inside. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Only a very important debate between sunflowers and roses." He looked around. Who was winning? The roses currently hold a narrow lead. Ethan laughed. Hearing it again made Claire realize she liked the sound. Good to know. For a moment, neither seemed entirely certain what came next. Then Ethan noticed a bucket of flowers waiting near the counter. "Need help with anything?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "You came here to volunteer?" "Maybe. Most people buy flowers. I might do that too." Claire smiled and handed him a small bundle of ribbon. "Then you can start by helping me tie these arrangements." To Ethan's surprise, he enjoyed the task. For nearly an hour, they worked side by side. Customers entered and left. Conversations flowed naturally. Claire told stories about difficult wedding orders and last-minute deliveries. Ethan listened closely. Whenever she laughed, he found himself smiling. The simplicity of the afternoon felt strangely refreshing. Nobody discussed stock prices. Nobody mentioned corporate strategy. Nobody wanted anything from him. Eventually, Claire glanced at the wall clock. "You know, you still never explained what happened that night." Ethan hesitated. The truth was complicated. "I was dealing with some personal issues." Claire nodded. "Better now?" Ethan looked at her. "Actually, yes." The answer was more honest than she realized. Claire smiled. "Good." A comfortable silence followed. Then Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and carefully removed the blue scarf. I should probably return this. Claire looked at the scarf and laughed softly. You kept it? Of course. It is just a scarf. Ethan shook his head. Not really. For a brief moment their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance yet. Not quite. Recognition perhaps. Two people sensing that an ordinary encounter might not be as ordinary as it seemed. Before leaving, Ethan purchased a small bouquet despite insisting he knew nothing about flowers. Claire wrapped it carefully. Who are they for? She asked. Ethan accepted the bouquet and smiled. Someone who helped a stranger. Claire laughed. That sounds suspiciously convenient. Maybe a little. As he reached the door, he paused. Thank you again, Claire. For the flowers? For stopping that night. His voice carried a sincerity that caught her off guard. Then he left. Claire watched through the window as he disappeared down the sidewalk, carrying the bouquet. She had no idea she was watching one of the wealthiest men in Massachusetts walk away. Ethan, meanwhile, had already realized something important. He originally returned to give back a scarf. Instead, he found himself looking for an excuse to come back again. Over the next week, Ethan found more reasons to visit Bennett Flowers than any reasonable person should have needed. One afternoon, he arrived claiming he needed flowers for a corporate dinner. 2 days later, he returned because an assistant supposedly forgot to place an order. Then he appeared again because he wanted advice about which flowers lasted longest in an office. Even Ethan recognized how transparent the excuses were becoming. Claire seemed to notice too. Fortunately, she appeared amused rather than annoyed. Let me guess, Claire said one Thursday afternoon as the bell above the door chimed. Another flower emergency? Ethan smiled. This one is serious. Should I call professional help? That may be necessary. Claire laughed and shook her head. The sound immediately brightened his day. What surprised Ethan most was how natural everything felt. Their conversations flowed effortlessly. Hours passed without either noticing. Around Claire, he never felt pressured to perform or impress. He could simply exist. That was a rare gift. One rainy afternoon, business slowed unexpectedly. Claire sat behind the counter reviewing invoices while Ethan helped organize supplies in the back room. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Ethan looked up. Sure. What exactly do you do? The question had been inevitable. Ethan chose his words carefully. Business consulting. Claire narrowed her eyes slightly. That sounds vague. Because it is vague. You travel a lot? Too much. Claire nodded thoughtfully. Do you enjoy it? Ethan paused. Before meeting her, he would have answered yes automatically. Now he was less certain. Sometimes. That sounds like a no. Ethan laughed. You are surprisingly good at this. At what? Knowing when people are avoiding answers. Claire smiled knowingly. Practice. Their conversation drifted toward favorite places, childhood memories, and future dreams. Ethan learned that Claire had inherited the flower shop from her grandmother. The business was not large. It was not glamorous. But she loved it. People think flowers are simple, she explained while trimming stems. They are not. Ethan leaned against the counter. Convince me. Claire smiled. Every arrangement tells a story. That sounds poetic. It is true. She held up a bouquet. Some celebrate beginnings. Some celebrate accomplishments. Some help people say things they struggle to express. Ethan studied her expression as she spoke. He realized she approached people the same way she approached flowers. With care, attention, respect. Every interaction mattered. Every person mattered. A few days later, Ethan arrived to find the shop unusually busy. Several customers filled the store. Deliveries waited near the door. Claire moved quickly between conversations. Without being asked, Ethan immediately started helping. He carried boxes, organized arrangements, assisted with deliveries. By closing time, both of them looked exhausted. Thank you, Claire said as they locked the front door. You saved my afternoon. Happy to help. She smiled warmly. Most people would not spend 4 hours working for free. Ethan laughed softly. Most people are smarter than I am. Claire rolled her eyes. I doubt that. For a moment, they stood together beneath the glow of the storefront lights. The evening air felt cool. Traffic moved steadily along the street. Neither seemed eager to leave. Finally, Claire spoke. Can I tell you something strange? Always. She hesitated briefly. It feels like I have known you longer than 2 weeks. Ethan's heart skipped. I was thinking the same thing. Their eyes met. Something deeper lingered there now. Not just friendship. Not yet love. But possibility. the kind that quietly changes everything. Unfortunately, the following morning brought unexpected complications. Ethan arrived at Brooks' Capital headquarters and discovered a crisis waiting for him. An international partnership required immediate attention. Multiple meetings had been scheduled. Investors expected updates. Travel arrangements were already underway. "You need to leave tonight," Daniel informed him. Ethan frowned. "For how long?" "A week. Possibly longer." The answer hit harder than it should have. Daniel noticed immediately. "You do realize most people do not look disappointed about private flights to London." Ethan ignored the comment. Yet throughout the day, one thought remained constant. Claire. That evening, Ethan walked into Bennett Flowers carrying a small paper bag. Claire looked up from arranging roses. "You seem serious." "I have to leave town." Her smile faded slightly. "Business." "Unfortunately." "For how long?" "I am not sure." Claire nodded. "Well, that is disappointing." The honesty surprised both of them. Ethan handed her the paper bag. "Before I go." Claire opened it carefully. Inside sat a small ceramic flower pot painted blue. Simple. Elegant. Handmade. "You bought me a flower pot?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "I figured you might know what to do with it." Claire laughed. "That is actually very thoughtful." For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan looked at her seriously. "I will come back." Claire smiled softly. "You do not have to make promises." "I know." He held her gaze. "But I want to." Something about the certainty in his voice made her believe him. The next morning, before sunrise, Ethan left Boston. His schedule would pull him across an ocean. Meetings, contracts, negotiations, responsibilities. Yet as the city disappeared beneath the clouds, he found himself thinking about a flower shop, a blue scarf, and a woman who had unknowingly become the most important part of his day. Far below, Claire opened her store as usual. Life continued. Customers arrived. Flowers bloomed. Yet each time the bell above the door chimed, a small part of her looked up hoping to see Ethan standing there again. Neither realized it yet, but distance was about to make their growing connection impossible to ignore. 10 days passed before Ethan finally returned to Boston. For Claire, those 10 days felt strangely longer than they should have. She stayed busy. Wedding orders filled her schedule. Holiday arrangements kept customers coming through the door. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet every time the bell above the entrance chimed, part of her still looked up expecting to see Ethan standing there with another questionable excuse for buying flowers. He never appeared. Not because he forgot. Not because he stopped caring. His schedule overseas had become increasingly demanding. Meetings stretched late into the night. Investors requested presentations. Corporate negotiations consumed entire days. Yet despite the distance, Ethan found himself thinking about Claire constantly. One evening in London, while reviewing documents inside a luxury hotel suite, he noticed the blue scarf folded carefully beside his laptop. Daniel Mercer glanced at it and sighed. "You carried that thing across the Atlantic?" Ethan did not even look up. "Apparently." Daniel shook his head. "This is becoming serious." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe." Back in Boston, Claire was discovering something equally unsettling. She missed him. Not dramatically. Not in a way she wanted to admit aloud. She simply noticed his absence everywhere. The flower shop felt quieter. Less interesting. Less bright. One Saturday afternoon, after finishing a large delivery, Claire stopped at a downtown cafe before heading home. She ordered coffee and sat near the window overlooking a busy city plaza. People rushed past carrying shopping bags and umbrellas. Street musicians performed near the corner. Large digital advertising screens towered above the buildings. Claire absent-mindedly stirred her coffee while thinking about Ethan. Then everything changed. A new advertisement appeared across the massive screen overlooking the plaza. At first she barely noticed. Then she froze. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to the table. Her heart skipped, so suddenly she thought she might have imagined it. The face on the screen belonged to Ethan, not someone who resembled him. Ethan, the same man who helped organize flowers in her shop. The same man who laughed at her terrible jokes. The same man who carried a blue scarf around Boston. Claire stared upward in disbelief. The advertisement shifted to reveal a polished corporate campaign. A familiar name appeared beneath his photograph. Ethan Brooks, founder and chief executive officer. Brooks Capital. Claire blinked several times. Surely there had to be some mistake. Yet the image remained. Large. Clear. Impossible to misunderstand. Around her, People barely reacted. They already knew who he was. One businessman passing nearby even pointed toward the screen while speaking to a colleague. "That is Brooks," he said casually. "The billionaire investor." Claire felt the world tilt slightly. Billionaire, investor, chief executive officer. None of those words belonged to the Ethan she knew, or at least the Ethan she thought she knew. Her mind immediately replayed dozens of conversations. Every vague answer, every carefully redirected question, every unexplained absence. Suddenly everything made sense. The expensive watch he rarely wore, the way he carried himself, his knowledge of business, the black SUV that arrived during the storm. Claire sat motionless as realization settled over her. Ethan Brooks was not a traveling consultant. He was one of the most recognizable business leaders in the country. Several minutes later, she returned to the flower shop carrying more questions than answers. That evening, she opened the desk drawer near the register. Inside rested the rain-damaged business card from the night they met. Carefully, she removed it and examined it beneath brighter light. What remained of the lettering suddenly became obvious. Brooks. The name had been there all along. She simply never noticed. Meanwhile, Ethan's private jet landed at Logan Airport shortly before sunset. Boston spread beneath the evening sky like a familiar welcome. For the first time in days, he felt genuinely relaxed. His first thought was Claire. He planned to visit the flower shop the following morning. Maybe buy another bouquet he did not need. Maybe finally tell her more of the truth. He had delayed the conversation too long already. Inside his apartment later that night, Ethan stood near the window overlooking the city lights. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from executives. He ignored them all. Instead, he found himself smiling while imagining Claire's reaction when he walked through the shop door again. Across the city, Claire sat alone inside Bennett Flowers after closing. The blue flower pot Ethan had given her rested near the window. She looked from it to the damaged business card in her hand. Questions filled her thoughts. Why had he hidden something so important? Was any of it real? The friendship? The conversations? The growing connection she could no longer deny? Outside, city lights shimmered across the streets. Neither Claire nor Ethan slept easily that night. One carried a secret that could no longer remain hidden. The other had just discovered that the man she missed was far more extraordinary than she ever imagined. And by sunrise, both of their lives would begin changing in ways neither could possibly predict. The next morning arrived with a tension neither Claire nor Ethan could escape. Ethan woke before sunrise and immediately checked the time. His first free day in nearly 2 weeks stretched ahead of him. No flights, no investor meetings, no international calls. For once, he had exactly one plan. Visit Bennett Flowers. Across town, Claire unlocked her shop with very different thoughts occupying her mind. The revelation from the previous afternoon had changed everything. Every memory now carried a second meaning. The man she believed was a traveling consultant was actually Ethan Brooks. Newspapers called him a visionary businessman. Financial magazines called him one of the most influential investors in America. Yet somehow he was also the same man who tied ribbons beside her counter and carried flower boxes through the rain. Claire still did not know what to make of that contradiction. Around 10 o'clock, the familiar bell above the door chimed. Claire looked up immediately. Ethan stood in the entrance holding a bouquet of white lilies. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The silence felt different than before. He could see questions in her eyes. She could see uncertainty in his. "Hi," Ethan said softly. "Hi." The simple greeting carried far more weight than usual. Ethan stepped forward slowly. "You found out." Claire folded her arms gently. "You could say that." Ethan exhaled. "I was planning to tell you. Eventually." The question was fair. He nodded honestly. "Eventually." Claire looked away for a moment. "I saw your face on a billboard." Ethan laughed despite himself. "That is not exactly how I imagined it happening." Her expression softened slightly, though confusion remained. "Why did you not tell me?" Ethan set the flowers on the counter. "Because the first time we met, you had no idea who I was." Claire listened quietly. "And that mattered to you? More than you realize." Ethan looked directly at her. "Most people know my name before they meet me." His voice remained calm. "You only knew Ethan." The sincerity caught her off guard. "You still should have told me." "I know." There was no argument in his response. No attempt to defend himself. Just honesty. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Claire surprised him. "Are those flowers for me?" Ethan smiled. "Yes." She looked at the bouquet. You know I own a flower shop. I do. So giving me flowers is a little risky. I like living dangerously. Claire laughed despite herself. The tension eased slightly. Ethan immediately noticed. So did she. The next hour passed more comfortably than either expected. They talked. Really talked. Ethan answered questions he had avoided before. He explained how Brooks Capital started. He described growing up in a middle-class family before building his company. He admitted that wealth often complicated relationships. Claire listened carefully. The more he spoke, the more she realized something important. The person sitting across from her had not changed. The facts had changed. His identity had changed. But Ethan remained Ethan, the same thoughtful man she already knew. Later that afternoon, another unexpected development arrived. A representative from a commercial development company entered the flower shop carrying documents. Claire recognized him immediately. He had visited twice before. "Miss Bennett," he said politely. "We would like to discuss purchasing this property." Claire's smile disappeared. Ethan quietly observed from nearby. "I already gave my answer." The representative remained professional. "Our offer has increased significantly." Claire shook her head. "It is not for sale." The man left shortly afterward, but the encounter clearly affected her. Ethan waited until the door closed. "That happens often." Claire sighed. "More than I would like." She explained how several developers had been attempting to purchase properties throughout the neighborhood. Small businesses faced increasing pressure. Rent continued rising. Some longtime owners had already sold. Ethan listened carefully. His expression grew more serious with every detail. "And the flower shop?" he asked. Claire glanced around the room. "My grandmother built this place." Her voice softened. "I am not ready to give it up." Ethan understood immediately. This was not about real estate. It was about history, community, family, the same qualities he admired most about her. That evening, after leaving the shop, Ethan made several phone calls. By midnight, he had reviewed every major development proposal connected to Claire's neighborhood. What he discovered concerned him. Several investment groups planned aggressive expansion over the next year. Bennett Flowers sat directly in the middle of their target area. The following morning, Ethan arrived at his corporate headquarters carrying a determination that surprised even him. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he told Daniel. "I need information about the Harbor District redevelopment project." Daniel looked confused. "That neighborhood project?" "Yes." "Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because someone important lives there." Meanwhile, Claire stood inside her flower shop arranging fresh roses near the window. Outside, people hurried along busy sidewalks. Life appeared completely normal. Yet she could not stop thinking about Ethan. The truth had complicated everything. It should have pushed them apart. Instead, somehow, it had brought them closer. Neither realized it yet, but a much larger challenge was already approaching. And when it arrived, Ethan Brooks would have to decide whether protecting Claire mattered more than protecting his carefully controlled world. Over the following weeks, Ethan and Claire found themselves standing between two worlds that seemed determined to remain separate. On some mornings, Ethan helped unload flower deliveries before heading to meetings in glass towers overlooking Boston Harbor. On other evenings, Claire found herself attending charity events and business gatherings she never would have imagined entering a month earlier. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One Tuesday evening, Ethan invited her to a fundraising gala hosted by a local foundation. Claire almost declined. The invitation alone felt intimidating. She owned a flower shop. She spent most days arranging roses and helping customers choose bouquets for birthdays and anniversaries. The thought of walking into a ballroom filled with executives, investors, and public figures made her nervous. "You do not have to impress anyone," Ethan told her while they sat inside a quiet cafe. "Easy for you to say." "Why?" Claire laughed softly. "Because half the room already knows who you are." Ethan shook his head. "That is exactly why I want you there." Claire studied him curiously. "What does that mean?" Ethan smiled. "Because you are one of the few people who knew me before all the introductions." His answer stayed with her long after the conversation ended. 2 nights later, Claire entered the grand ballroom, wearing a simple navy blue dress. She looked elegant without trying to. Ethan noticed her the moment she arrived. For several seconds, he simply stood there smiling. Daniel Mercer noticed immediately. "You have that look again." Ethan glanced at him. "What look?" "The one that tells me you are completely distracted." Ethan ignored him and walked directly toward Claire. Throughout the evening, Claire handled herself better than she expected. She spoke with community leaders, met local business owners, shared stories about her flower shop. Most people responded warmly, yet not everyone did. Near the end of the event, Claire overheard a conversation she was clearly not meant to hear. Two guests stood near a display table discussing Ethan. "So that is her?" one woman asked quietly. "Apparently. Interesting." The second woman glanced toward Claire. Quite a promotion from flower shop owner. Neither comment was openly cruel, yet the implication felt obvious. Claire smiled politely and walked away before they noticed her listening. The words stayed with her for the rest of the evening. Later, while driving home, Ethan noticed her unusual silence. "Everything all right?" Claire looked out the window. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." She hesitated. Do people always assume the worst? Ethan already knew what she meant. "Sometimes." Claire nodded slowly. "They think I am interested in your money." Ethan's expression softened. "Anyone who knows you for 5 minutes would never believe that." "Maybe." "Claire." She looked at him. "I am serious." His voice carried absolute certainty. "You helped me before you knew who I was. That matters." Claire smiled faintly, but the doubt remained. Over the next several days, the pressure continued growing. Articles appeared online whenever Ethan attended public events. Photographs occasionally captured him and Claire together. Most comments were harmless. Some were supportive, others were not. Claire tried ignoring them, yet it became increasingly difficult. One afternoon, she closed the flower shop later than usual and found Ethan waiting outside with coffee. "Long day?" he asked. Claire accepted the cup gratefully. "Long week." They walked together through the neighborhood. Leaves drifted across the sidewalks as autumn deepened around them. Finally, Claire stopped near a small park. "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" Ethan laughed quietly. "Every day. I mean it." Ethan turned toward her. "So do I." Claire looked down. "Before I knew who you were, everything felt easy. It still can. Can it?" The question lingered between them. Ethan stepped closer. "The only thing that changed was information." Claire looked into his eyes. "That is not entirely true." Ethan understood immediately. Wealth changed perception, expectations, assumptions, entire social dynamics. Neither of them had created those realities, but both had to live with them. "I cannot change who I am," Ethan said quietly. "And I would never ask you to," Claire replied. "Then what are you afraid of?" Claire took a deep breath. "That eventually your world will expect me to become someone else." Ethan shook his head. "The reason I keep coming back is because you are exactly who you are." His answer touched her more than she expected. For a moment, the worries faded. Yet unseen forces were already moving around them. Inside corporate offices across the city, development plans continued advancing. Investors continued discussing properties in Claire's neighborhood. And among them was one executive who viewed Bennett Flowers as an obstacle rather than a community landmark. Neither Claire nor Ethan knew it yet, but the growing pressure surrounding the neighborhood was about to become personal. And when it did, their relationship would face its first real test. The first real crack appeared on a gray Monday morning. Claire arrived at Bennett Flowers carrying fresh inventory orders and a sense of cautious optimism. Business had been improving. Community support remained strong. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful about the future. That feeling lasted less than an hour. Shortly after opening, an official-looking envelope arrived by courier. Claire opened it behind the counter and immediately felt her stomach tighten. The document outlined a proposed redevelopment expansion affecting multiple properties throughout the neighborhood. Bennett Flowers was listed among them. Although no immediate action was required, the message was clear. Powerful investors intended to reshape the area. Claire reread the letter twice before setting it aside. Customers entered throughout the morning, but her attention kept returning to the envelope. By noon, she finally called Ethan. "Can we meet?" she asked. "Of course," he replied immediately. 2 hours later, they sat together inside the flower shop after closing. Ethan reviewed the documents carefully. The more he read, the more concerned he became. "This proposal is larger than I expected." Claire folded her arms. "Can they force people out?" Ethan chose his words carefully. "Not directly." "That is not reassuring." He sighed. "I know." For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Claire looked at him. "Are any of your companies involved?" The question landed harder than she intended. Ethan met her eyes honestly. "Not directly." "Directly?" "Claire, just answer me." Ethan leaned back slowly. "Some investment groups connected to projects we have previously funded are participating. Silence filled the room. Claire looked away first. She knew Ethan had done nothing wrong. Yet suddenly the problem felt much closer than before. I understand why that sounds bad, Ethan said quietly. It does sound bad. He nodded. Fair enough. Over the next several days, public discussion surrounding the redevelopment intensified. Local newspapers published articles. Community meetings filled quickly. Business owners expressed concerns about rising costs and displacement. Unfortunately, Ethan's name began appearing in multiple reports simply because of his reputation within the investment community. Soon people started connecting dots that were not entirely accurate. One afternoon, Claire entered a neighborhood meeting and immediately noticed conversations stopping when she walked into the room. Most people remained friendly. Some did not. After the meeting ended, one frustrated business owner approached her. Tell your billionaire boyfriend to leave the neighborhood alone. Claire froze. He is not responsible for this. Maybe not. The man shrugged. But people like him always benefit. Claire drove home feeling unsettled. For the first time since meeting Ethan, she wondered whether their worlds could truly coexist. The following evening, Ethan arrived at the flower shop carrying coffee as usual. Claire accepted it, but something felt different. He noticed immediately. Talk to me. Claire stared out the window. Everywhere I go, people are talking about this project. Ethan remained silent. Some of them think I am helping it happen. That is ridiculous. Maybe. She shook her head. Maybe not. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Claire turned toward him. It means your world creates problems mine has to live with. The words hung heavily between them. Ethan looked genuinely hurt. You think I want this? No. Then what are we doing right now? Claire did not have an answer. That was the problem. She cared about him deeply, perhaps more deeply than she wanted to admit. Yet every day their lives became more complicated. Every day the gap between their realities seemed larger. A week later, the situation worsened. An online article published photographs of Claire and Ethan together beneath a headline questioning potential conflicts of interest connected to neighborhood development. The story contained speculation rather than facts, but that hardly mattered. Rumors spread quickly. Customers asked uncomfortable questions. Reporters began calling the flower shop. Claire felt overwhelmed. One evening, she closed early and sat alone among the flowers long after sunset. The blue flower pot Ethan had given her rested near the window. Nearby sat the rain-damaged business card from the night they met. Both objects reminded her of a simpler beginning. A stranger. A rainy night. No complications. No headlines. No assumptions. Just kindness. When Ethan arrived later that evening, he found her sitting quietly. I am going to fix this, he said immediately. Claire looked up sadly. I know you want to. Then trust me. She smiled faintly. That is not the issue. Ethan sat beside her. Then tell me what is. Claire took a long breath. I am tired. Her voice trembled slightly. Tired of defending myself. Tired of people assuming things. Tired of feeling like I am being pulled into a world I never asked for. Ethan listened without interruption. The honesty in her words hurt because he understood them. Finally, Claire stood. Tears threatened to form, though she fought them back. Maybe we need some distance. Ethan stared at her. Claire, just for now. The silence that followed felt unbearable. Outside, evening traffic continued moving through Boston as though nothing had changed. Inside the flower shop, everything had changed. For the second time since they met, Ethan watched Claire walk away from him. And as the door closed softly behind her, he realized losing her now felt far worse than never meeting her at all. 3 days passed without a single conversation between Claire and Ethan. For Claire, the silence felt both necessary and painful. She focused entirely on work. Every morning, she opened Bennett flowers before sunrise. Every evening, she stayed late arranging inventory and preparing orders. The routine helped, at least temporarily. Yet no matter how busy she became, reminders of Ethan seemed to appear everywhere. The blue flower pot remained near the window. The rain-damaged business card still rested inside the register drawer. Most of all, the blue scarf lingered in her memory. The simple act that started everything. Meanwhile, Ethan refused to accept that distance was the solution. He respected Claire's feelings. He understood why she felt overwhelmed. But he also knew something she did not. The assumptions surrounding her were wrong. The rumors were wrong. The narrative being created around Bennett flowers was wrong. And he intended to prove it. Late one evening, Ethan sat inside a conference room at Brooks Capital with Daniel Mercer and several senior executives. Documents covered the table. Property records filled multiple screens. "I want everything," Ethan said. "Every investor relationship. Every redevelopment proposal. Every financial connection." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You are conducting a full investigation?" "Yes." "For a neighborhood flower shop?" Ethan looked directly at him. "For the truth." Over the next 48 hours, Ethan learned far more than he expected. Several investment groups had been aggressively purchasing properties throughout the Harbor District. Publicly, they described the effort as modernization. Privately, the strategy focused almost entirely on profit. Small businesses were being pressured. Longtime owners were being pushed toward difficult choices. Most importantly, Brooks Capital was not involved in the project despite public assumptions. In fact, Ethan had rejected participation months earlier because he disliked the proposal. By Friday morning, he possessed enough documentation to prove it. Yet facts alone were not enough. Claire deserved more than a private explanation. She deserved public truth. That same afternoon, the city announced an upcoming community forum regarding redevelopment plans. Business owners, investors, local officials, and residents would gather to discuss the future of the neighborhood. Ethan immediately confirmed attendance. Across town, Claire received the same invitation. She considered ignoring it. The entire situation had exhausted her. But Bennett Flowers stood directly in the path of the proposed changes. Staying silent was no longer an option. Saturday evening arrived with clear skies and cool autumn air. The community center quickly filled with residents. Reporters lined the back wall. Business owners occupied rows of folding chairs. Conversations buzzed throughout the room. Claire entered quietly and found a seat near the middle. She had not expected to see Ethan. Then she noticed him standing near the front. Their eyes met briefly. Neither smiled. Neither looked away immediately either. The meeting began. Developers presented plans. Community members voiced concerns. Local business owners shared personal stories. Tension gradually built throughout the evening. Then one speaker stepped forward and directly referenced recent rumors involving Claire and Ethan. Murmurs spread through the audience. Claire immediately felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. The familiar discomfort returned. Before she could react, Ethan stood. The room fell silent. He walked toward the microphone with calm confidence. "I would like to clarify several things." His voice carried easily across the room. Reporters immediately raised cameras. Ethan continued. "For weeks, assumptions have been made regarding my involvement in these redevelopment efforts." He paused. "Those assumptions are incorrect." Several people exchanged surprised looks. Ethan signaled toward a large screen positioned behind him. Documents appeared. Financial records. Corporate filings. Official correspondence. Brooks Capital rejected participation in this project months ago. The audience grew noticeably quieter. Ethan methodically presented evidence supporting every statement. Facts replaced speculation. Truth replaced rumor. Within minutes, the narrative surrounding him began collapsing. But Ethan was not finished. He looked toward Claire. "There is something else that needs to be said." The room remained completely silent. "The owner of Bennett Flowers has been unfairly targeted because of her association with me." His voice softened slightly. "Claire Bennett has never asked me for money, influence, favors, or opportunities." Claire felt her heart begin racing. Ethan continued. "In fact, she did not even know who I was when we met." Curious whispers spread through the audience. Ethan smiled faintly. One rainy night, while everyone else walked past, she stopped to help a stranger. Claire immediately recognized where the story was going. So did Ethan. Slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket. The audience watched closely. Then he revealed the blue scarf. The same scarf she had given him during the storm. Gasps and murmurs spread throughout the room. Ethan held it carefully. "This is what kindness looks like." His eyes found Claire again. Not wealth. Not influence. Not status. He paused. Kindness. For several seconds nobody spoke. The moment felt bigger than the meeting itself. Bigger than redevelopment plans. Bigger than public opinion. Claire felt tears threatening to form. Not because Ethan defended her reputation. Because he remembered. Every detail. Every moment. Every act of kindness she assumed had been forgotten. As applause gradually filled the room, Claire realized something important. Ethan had returned exactly as he promised he would. And this time, he had returned carrying the truth. The community forum changed everything. By the following week, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Local newspapers published corrections. Community leaders praised transparency. More importantly, the truth finally reached the people who mattered most. The owners of small businesses throughout the Harbor District realized Claire had never been part of the problem. She had been fighting alongside them all along. Standing inside Bennett Flowers one bright autumn morning, Claire noticed something she had not felt in weeks. Peace. Customers filled the shop. Friendly conversations replaced uncomfortable questions. The atmosphere felt lighter, hopeful. Even the flowers seemed brighter beneath the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. Near the register sat the blue flower pot Ethan had given her. For the first time in a long while, she smiled every time she looked at it. Meanwhile, Ethan had remained busy behind the scenes. Using his influence responsibly, he worked with local officials, business owners, and community organizations to create an alternative neighborhood preservation plan. Instead of replacing longtime businesses, the proposal focused on supporting them. Grants became available. Rental protections expanded. Independent shops received resources that would help them remain part of the community for years to come. The announcement arrived during a public neighborhood celebration held several weeks later. Streets closed for the event. Local vendors lined the sidewalks. Musicians performed near outdoor stages. Families filled the area with laughter and energy. For the Harbor District, it felt less like a festival and more like a victory. Claire spent most of the afternoon helping organize floral displays near the Central Plaza. Everywhere she looked, people seemed happy, grateful, optimistic. Several business owners stopped to thank her personally. Others thanked Ethan. Together, they had become symbols of something larger than themselves. Kindness, community, second chances. As evening approached, the mayor stepped onto the main stage and officially announced the preservation initiative. Applause erupted across the crowd. Business owners embraced. Families celebrated. Claire stood near the front surrounded by friends and neighbors. Tears filled her eyes as she listened. Bennett Flowers would remain exactly where her grandmother built it. The neighborhood would keep its character. The future suddenly felt bright again. Then she noticed Ethan walking toward her through the crowd. He wore a dark suit, but for once he looked nothing like a billionaire executive. He looked exactly like the man she met during a rainstorm months earlier. Calm, genuine, familiar. People gradually stepped aside as he approached. Claire's heart immediately began racing. "Hi," he said softly. She smiled. "Hi yourself." Ethan laughed. "I missed hearing that." Claire looked down briefly. "I miss saying it." The honesty warmed both of them. Around them, the celebration continued. Music drifted through the air. String lights illuminated the plaza. Yet somehow everything else faded into the background. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. Claire immediately recognized the blue scarf. The same scarf she had given him on the night they met. The same scarf he carried through every challenge that followed. "You still have it," she said quietly. "Always." Ethan unfolded it carefully. "Do you remember what you said that night?" Claire smiled faintly. "Probably not. You told me everybody needs help sometimes." Her eyes softened. Ethan nodded. "You had no idea who I was." "That did not matter." "Exactly." He stepped closer. "You saw a stranger standing in the rain and decided he mattered anyway." Claire felt tears gathering again. Ethan continued. "That moment changed my life." The crowd nearby gradually noticed the conversation. Conversation slowed. Attention shifted toward them, yet neither seemed aware of anyone else. "Claire," Ethan said softly, "I spent years building businesses, making investments, and chasing success." He smiled. Then one rainy night, a flower shop owner reminded me what actually matters. Claire covered her mouth as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. Ethan lowered himself onto one knee. The entire plaza seemed to stop breathing. Gasps spread through the crowd. Music faded into the distance. Time itself appeared to slow. Ethan looked up at her with complete certainty. "You taught me that kindness is stronger than status. That integrity matters more than wealth. That home is not a place. It is a person." Tears rolled down Claire's cheeks. Ethan smiled. "Will you marry me?" The answer arrived instantly. "Yes." Her voice trembled. "Yes." Applause exploded across the plaza. Cheers echoed through the streets. Friends embraced one another. Business owners celebrated. Strangers smiled. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, Claire laughed through tears. Months earlier, She had stopped walking during a rainstorm because helping someone felt like the right thing to do. She never expected that decision would lead her here. She never imagined the stranger was a millionaire. She never imagined he would return. Yet standing beneath the lights of the harbor district, surrounded by the community they both helped protect, none of those things seemed important anymore. The wealth, the headlines, the obstacles, the misunderstandings, they all faded beside something far more valuable. Because in the end, the greatest thing Ethan Brooks found was not success. It was the woman who treated him like an ordinary man before she knew he was extraordinary. And the greatest thing Claire Bennett discovered was that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change two lives forever.